Welcome to the Cardinal Matters podcast, a podcast where we will discuss all things happening at Cardinal Newman School. We hope this podcast brings our school to you, our students, families, staff, alumni, and supporters. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining us on our first Cardinal Matters podcast. My name is David Cochrane, host of this new podcast, and today I'm joined by my guest co-host, Mrs. Tully. Mrs. Tully is a graduate of Franciscan University of Steubenville with a degree in theology and is one of Cardinal Newman's theology instructors. Thank you for joining us on this first episode.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So in our first episode, we are joined by Father Will Fry, the chaplain at Cardinal Newman School, here for a few more weeks, and Father Christopher Loester, our new chaplain, who will officially take the reins just after Christmas, right? I think. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
So I figured in this first episode, we should start with getting to know Father Loester. So if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to South Carolina and who you are.
Okay, so originally born and raised on Long Island, New York. And I moved down to South Carolina about 4 years ago. And I was ordained, it'll be 2 years in June. And currently assigned to St. Joseph's as their parochial vicar and the new chaplain for Cardinal Newman. And I come from a medium-sized family. I have an older brother and a younger sister. My parents are still alive. They live in Maryland, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. We're glad to have you. I'm sure you have a plan to integrate your calling to the priesthood into your ministry here at the school, but just would like to ask you if you can share with us a little bit about your calling.
So, that's my calling started when I was in high school, and I think most high school kids, I really wasn't sure where I was going, what I was doing, and I kind of put that calling on the back burner until later on in life. I was 28 when I entered the seminary, and started seminary already with a bachelor's degree, but went through 10 years of seminary formation to become a priest, and never looked back. It was a great decision and something that I truly enjoy doing and being a part of. And so it brings me great joy to be able to bring my experiences and my knowledge to the table here at Cardinal Newman to help those who might be discerning and those who maybe even just looking to broaden their faith understandings of Christ and his church and what's going on in the world.
What's your advice to, because you first heard that call in high school, what's your advice to someone who's maybe hearing that call to the priesthood in high school or just anyone in general?
Well, personally, I think my delaying of my call was beneficial. It helped me to grow as a human being, as a man, allowed me to do soul searching and find exactly what it was that was missing, and then appropriately investigate and find the path that God is looking for me to go down. It was something that needed to happen, and everybody's calling is different, but having the real world experience of working in the real world, going to college and getting a degree that I really enjoyed doing was immensely beneficial to my abilities now. So it was kind of God planted the seed, he watered it, and he just waited for me to be ready. And I think that people these days need to slow down and just take the time to listen, to see what God is saying, because we often rush, 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 and that old saying, haste makes waste. It really would have been a disaster for me if I had not waited. I think I learned a tremendous amount about myself, about society, about people, and before I entered the seminary, so that when I entered in, I had a different perspective. I had a different viewpoint of what was going on, how it integrates with my life, and how God is asking me to go forward.
Oh,
Jasmine.
I was just gonna. This is a question for both of you, but like, what are your favorite parts about being a priest?
It's an excellent question and a difficult question.
Yeah.
Definitely the sacraments, for sure. And I'd say in general, constantly being among the things of God and being with people and trying to be sort of this bridge between God and people. And I love seeing people's faith grow, and I also learn a lot from them. So I think the sacraments, and then just being with others.
Do you have a favorite sacrament to celebrate?
So a priest has to say the Mass.
Okay. Second favorite.
Yeah.
Probably, if I had to choose, so I really enjoy confession.
You don't have to, but we would like you to.
I'd say confession. And I think miracles happen frequently in that sacrament, unbeknownst to the world. You know, it's very intimate, very private, and very moving.
I'm going to actually derail us here for a minute and go down an avenue with confession. So some of our listeners in this podcast may not be Catholic, and we plan to talk about that here in a little bit. But sometimes confession is a really foreign concept to non-Catholics, and we have a lot of non-Catholics in our community. So I don't know if we want to talk just a brief minute on kind of the Catholic teaching in confession.
Would you like to start?
So my first experience with confession with non-Catholics was here at this school. The students approached the confessional almost the same way Catholics would, with reference with a deep heart that they were looking to receive healing and solace from. And so I think that even though they were not Catholic and couldn't technically receive the pardoning of their sins, it was still good to be able to talk it out, to be able to pray with them, to offer God's blessing for them, and maybe give them some guidance that, who knows, it may have, patched the wound or started the healing process, or maybe it was just something that's happening in the school that they didn't quite understand why, and we were able to explain and become one with an understanding to restore peace and harmony within the soul. So even though they're not being absolved, they still experience God's love. They still experience the divine healer present to them, even though they're not Catholic.
And I might use the microphone as an example. It sits on a tripod. So the Church has 3 legs, if you will, in her teaching: Scripture, tradition, and the magisterium. Scripturally, we see confession, for example, after Christ's resurrection, and he meets the apostles, he breathes on them, receive the Holy Spirit, whose sins you forgive are forgiven, whose sins you retain are retained. And so this authority given by Christ to the apostles was passed on to their successors through the bishops, and then their helpers, us priests. And as Father Christopher explained, Christ, who made the human person, knows our needs, and not only is there absolution of sin, there's great relief even psychologically, in knowing that we've confessed and are forgiven. So I find it very beautiful and very consoling. And priests go to confession, to friends, brother priests.
Right.
So last week you guys were awesome and said in the confessional all day. And we got to bring our kids down for adoration and confession. And the best moment was when one of my classes, they came in, they all sat down, and I had examinations of consciences for them on their desks. And I was like, we're going to go down to confession. And they were all like, yes, thank goodness, I need to go. And I just loved that. I think a lot of people can approach the confessional with fear because, you have to say everything that you've done that's wrong. And that's a very anxiety inducing experience. But when my kids with the little 7th graders, their childlike openness was really I was so impressed by that they were excited to go, and just they were getting in line, and they were, it's just so great to see that they want the sacrament so much. It's really as a teacher, just really inspiring to me, and really healing for me too, because I've experienced anxiety with confession before, and just seeing them and how they approach it, I'm inspired by it, and I want to be more like them, saying, yes, I get to go to confession.
It's awesome.
One other point that confession helps, especially those who are not Catholic, but in a way to understand morals, right, and how we are to live our lives, right? Not because necessarily that the Catholic Church says so, but God says so. He says so in a way that's so profound on the mountain when he gives Moses the 10 Commandments. And a lot of times people don't understand, it might say, thou shalt not kill as the 5th commandment, but there's a deeper understanding to that. There's thou shalt not murder, in the sense that destroying one's person, destroying one's possessions, destroying one's life. It's deeper. And so by them being able to study and put into practice with that examination of conscience to see where they are on a level with doing God's will is very important.
And it's just one of those opportunities, like you said earlier, of slowing down. I love that we did it right before the end of school, because the kids are oh my gosh, I need to get through all this stuff, and I have all these grades to get in before Christmas, and I just want to get to break. And so being able to take a class period and just bring them down to the chapel and to have adoration and to have confession and to just really invite them to slow down, because all of us, but especially kids with technology and everything, that's one of the biggest things that I want to give to my students, and I think a lot of us too, is just an opportunity to slow down, to meet God. And so I thank you guys again for doing that, because that was really awesome.
I think too, it's important with chaplaincy in a Catholic school to note that you guys are also here for us, the adults in the building, and our spiritual formation. And a lot of times the things that we're reminding the kids to do, to slow down, to spend time with Christ, to pray and reflect, we have to be reminded of too, because things get really busy, and it's nice that we get to all grow together in this building in our faith. So,
and sometimes when a priest preaches, he's also preaching to himself. So challenging others is a way of challenging oneself too.
Right.
So I agree.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful cycle. Well, Father Fry, it's been awesome having you here for the last 2.5 years. I know personally we've got to spend a lot of time together, and I really appreciate you and all that you do, and I know the whole school does. But when you kind of reflect back on your 2.5 years here, what do you think is your biggest highlight in your chaplaincy here? It's a big question.
Playing soccer.
Yeah, which I've not done too much here. I have at St. Joseph's School with the littles, but after 2.5 years, getting to know faculty, staff, students, and giving them time to get to know me, and just seeing certain areas of growth in that time, in all of us, in different ways. So I'll most especially miss the people. I love the campus, I love the new building, I love all that's offered. But for me, what really makes the school are the people. and it's just been a great joy walking with and growing with them.
How have you, like, when you talk about highlights and all, like, kind of what you're just saying, but how do you feel that you've seen Christ working in our students and in the faculty and in the building? What are some, not necessarily examples, but what are some of the things you've witnessed and excite you?
One thing that continues to blow me away is that people listen. So perhaps during homilies, the students look a little sleepy, or they're looking elsewhere, but they really soak things in. And as we talk in the halls or wherever, I just realize from things they say that it's something perhaps I had said earlier, and they're just soaking things in. They're good at thinking and sort of taking things with a grain of salt, thinking about how it might apply to them. And they've been very open, especially as I prepare to leave. They've been open, sharing how perhaps one thing or another that I've shared has helped them, and they've tried to put into practice. So that's something very humbling, and something that I certainly would consider a highlight, that they're present, they are listening, and they're sort of fighting their own battle, in God's time. So I find that beautiful.
Can you share a little bit about your new assignment and where you're going? So, obviously when priests are transferred, right, it's usually sad, and you have a great new priest coming in, but you also build a relationship with someone, and you're still going to be a priest in this diocese, and you won't be too far away. And I'm sure
so that everyone can track you down. That's what we want to know.
A little bit about your new assignment and kind of what you're looking forward to in your new assignment.
So I'll be assigned to St. Mary in Greenville. It's in the center of the city, more or less. Its full name actually is St. Mary of the Sacred Heart, which is a little unusual.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And I'll be parochial vicar, aka the little guy, basically helping the pastor, who has to be in Charleston at least 3 days a week for different types of work at the chancery, the bishop's office. And the church also has a mission called St. Sebastian. It's all in Spanish. So a mission is a smaller church growing eventually to the size of a parish where it can kind of stand on its own. And so I'll split my time between the two, St. Mary and St. Sebastian. My day off is Monday, and I plan to take great advantage of hiking trails in the area. So everyone is more than welcome to come up for a day hike. We can catch up. I think that'd be fun.
Upstate is a beautiful part of the state.
You can do a hiking mass.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the goal of this podcast is to have a lot of different topics and introduce our community to our school in maybe some different ways. And we're trying to align it with the 4 pillars of Catholic education. And this obviously fits into the mission and Catholic identity. So I just want to spend a few minutes talking about Catholic identity and how we live a Catholic culture through our Catholic identity here at Cardinal Newman. So just maybe we just start by opening the floor and kind of just go around, and whoever wants to respond and talk a little bit about what it means to be a Catholic school and how we live this Catholic culture here at Cardinal Newman. Whoever wants to go first.
I think we can start. I mean, the Eucharist, the church says, is the source and summit of our faith. So I feel like talking about the Mass will be a good start. And since you guys are the ones saying the Mass, if we want to start talking about that.
Well, I would like to first start with what society defines identity as.
Yeah, that's good.
It's something that it's a distinguishing character, right? Or personality of an individual, right? And so when we apply the word Catholic to identity, right, it is what makes us specifically Catholic, right? Which would be the Mass, the sacraments, the church, the things how we live our lives, our faith and morals, right? These are all very important aspects of what makes us or identifies us as being Catholic, right? And so that's I think, the first starting point that we should look at, right? What is it that makes us Catholic in identity? Right? Even though there are students here in this school that are not Catholic by their faith standards, they still have to adhere to some of that Catholic identity, that Christian identity of, how we live our lives, how we go about doing our daily deeds, toiling in the soil, to use, a biblical image when God says that, you will toil for your food. You will have to work the ground, and you will have to be a part of this world. And so I think that's our first starting point. But yes, the Mass is one of our, it is the source and summit of our faith, and being able to receive the Eucharist on a weekly, if not more, basis helps our identity as Catholics to grow, because we receive the full body, blood, soul, and divinity of the Lord every time we receive the Eucharist at Mass. And so this is something integral to being Catholic.
And I would say the Mass also, it's our identity, it's also our mission, in the sense that our mission ultimately is heaven, our goal. And we're trying to form everyone present at Cardinal Newman as a whole person, helping them keep in mind that goal that is heaven. And Mass, is, as you know as a theology teacher, is that point where heaven meets earth in a very profound way. So certainly that is our source and summit. That's our identity. That's our mission. That's how and through which we live.
I think in the National Catholic Education Association, they have standards and benchmarks for Catholic schools. And in the first standard, it says Catholic identity includes gospel values of focus on the Eucharist, a commitment to communal faith formation, academic excellence, missionary discipleship, and service. So maybe just talking a little bit about maybe how you've seen or how you plan to foster this idea of communal faith formation and missionary discipleship for students at Cardinal Newman.
All right. So, in terms of missionary discipleship and communal faith formation, right, all Christians are called to be people of hope, right? And hope can change the world, right? Hope is us. We are the ones that will eventually change the world, right? And by instilling that hope into the children, into their lives, so that when they are able to go out into the world, it is then transferred from them to the next person, almost a domino effect, that hope is something very important. We hope, like Father Fry said, to make it to heaven, to grow to be more Christ-like in our lives, and we hope for the return of Christ, and to make a comment on missionary discipleship, right? We need to foster the hope here so that when they go out, that's what a missionary does. They go out into the world. They bring that hope, that peace, that joy that they've received here, that education, that the fundamental building blocks with them. That's what's going to change our world.
And tangibly, I think service and charity, for that matter, begins at home, Cardinal Newman. And so we have so many opportunities, just at the Mass, for example, students altar serving, students lecturing, students in the choir who do so beautifully. once a month we have service opportunities in the community. And something newer are various mission trips that we're trying to make more and more available to students by way of fundraising one day. But it sounds like Costa Rica will be one location that we kind of stick to, and that perhaps in 2025 we'll be able to volunteer a bit with the Missionaries of Charity Sisters, Mother Teresa's sisters, in the Holler in Kentucky.
That's cool.
So different opportunities of starting here, serving, even through the arts and sports, and then going into the community and the larger world as well, as Father Christopher said.
Yeah, I love with service because all Cardinal Newman students have to get a certain number of hours of service depending on their grade. And in theology, they'll write service reflections, and I love reading them just to see like how creative a lot of them get in what they're doing. My favorite thing too is reading those reflections and letting them kind of see like that maturity that they encounter through service, through serving others, through realizing that, their blessings that they have, and seeing like where they can give their gifts and talents to others through all of that, and really just taking their time out of their days, their summers, their weeks, to be present with other people. I think kind of as they go through the year, because I teach 7th graders, so I like to see like their growth and seeing why service is important. And so far I've seen like even just from quarter 1 to quarter 2, the growth in seeing like service may be uncomfortable, but it's worth it, which is really great to see.
I think it's also interesting too. I have a lot of students who'll come and ask for service hours to do, fold worship aids or whatever. And I think sometimes they think that's like a quick way to get a service hour or whatnot. And I see a lot of beauty in that too, because from what I've seen is, the same kids that asked to fold worship aids for a service hour, right? Then they end up hanging around and helping do this and do that. And then all of a sudden that same kid in their, junior, senior year is always early, always staying after to help and doing the right thing. And they're not requesting a service hour for that anymore. So, the idea of requesting service hours and getting service hours and tallying them up, like how that grows into people, we get to also watch that on a daily basis. And I think that's really cool. Probably another topic we should talk a little bit about is also our academic religious program. So a little bit about our theology program. So Mrs. Tully, these questions are coming from you, but what can you tell us a little bit about our religious education programs and catechesis programs here at Cardinal Newman, and maybe like what makes them unique?
Yeah, so I teach 7th grade theology, and so every student every year takes theology. And I think one of the things that I really love about our theology program in particular is just how it builds on each other. Like 7th grade, which I teach, it's theology 101. It's for students who are coming in who maybe have never been in a Catholic school before or are not Catholic themselves. It really gives them like a good bird's eye view of the faith. And then 8th grade is church history, and so you kind of look at the development of the church and all of that. And then 9th grade is Old Testament, 10th grade is New Testament, 11th grade is morality and social justice, and then 12th grade is sacraments and apologetics, so how to defend the faith, which I think is a great way to end theology. Learning, you have all these years of learning what the Catholic faith is, and you're getting ready to go to college, and really being able to equip students to go out and to be missionary disciples is one of the key things of teaching them how do you defend the faith, how do you explain it to people in a logical way. But I really just like the natural progression of the theology program, that we kind of start off with this big picture about like what are some of the big things in the Catholic Church, like sacraments, morality. The first semester, I really ground my class in just walking through the life of Christ, and then, inserting like a unit on the sacraments when we're talking about, when we get to the bread of life discourse in John 6, like, okay, now we're going to have our unit on the Eucharist. So really kind of walking with Christ in his life, and then kind of showing the Catholic worldview, the Catholic Church, Catholic teaching as we walk through the life of Christ is kind of how I formulate my 7th grade class, so the introductory class. But I think one of the best things too, the goal of catechesis, this isn't just at Cardinal Newman, but just in general, is for teaching, understanding, and then encounter. So understanding what the Catholic Church teaches, who is Jesus, like all of those academic questions, but it's not just purely an academic class. We're ultimately teaching to bring students into an encounter with Jesus, even if they're not Catholic. A lot of my students, and so making prayer a priority in class, having opportunities to go to confession during class time, really showing students that it's not just the grade or the knowledge that you're going for. The reason why we have theology all these years at Cardinal Newman is so that students can be brought into an encounter with Jesus Christ and understand who he is so that they can know him and love him.
Next question we talked about a little bit before we started, but just kind of open up the floor to anybody, all of us. We have seen a lot of non-Catholic students join our community and really thrive in our community over, the last 10 years or so. And so for families who might be considering Cardinal Newman, maybe you're a little unsure of what a Catholic school is or, kind of the theological element of the school and the teachings. What can we kind of just discuss openly about, how we've seen non-Catholic students thrive in the community?
We're not about forcing conversion, on the one hand. On the other hand, we're also proudly Catholic and trying to even grow in our Catholic culture, for example. And again, it's about heaven as a goal, and sort of on the way, it's about forming the whole person. And I think that's one of the gifts that CN can provide to Catholics, non-Catholics, those with no faith at all, is that there's a place for you and the opportunity to grow as a whole person. And perhaps we open that door of the spiritual, of faith, just a little, to allow people to think and perhaps to ponder themselves, do I believe? Why or why not? If I do, am I desiring to know more? Because I think what you said is huge. It's sort of like that spiritual equation, knowledge plus love equals service. Mm-hmm. And I think some doubts today of God, some questions, in part are due to not having the knowledge, because there's so much there. It's so rich, the tradition, the teachings of the Church, what we know from Scripture. And I think CN is a great place to provide entry into that world.
And I think I love the fact that we have, a great number of students who are not Catholic, because I think it's good for all of us. With teaching a lot of, students who aren't Catholic and teaching theology, like it provides such an awesome dialogue in class. Just the questions they ask, it's good for my students who are Catholic and just kind of accept things are like, this is the way I was raised. I don't really, question like why we do something. And then having a student who's not Catholic, like ask the question, like, why is Mary so important to, Catholics? Like why is the Eucharist so important? Asking those questions allows, my Catholic students who just take it for granted to really understand, the why behind why we do what we do. So I think it just really helps, my Catholic students grow, because they get an opportunity to kind of sit and reflect and not just take things for granted. And I think, there are lots of people have misconceptions about what the Catholic Church is. And so what I've really noticed is that my students realize, throughout the year talking about, Catholic teaching, is that we have a lot more in common than we do differences. And I really love, watching my students kind of realize that and be able to walk with each other in faith, in Christ, even if they're not Catholic, if they're Christian, be able to pray together and to support each other in faith, even if it's not, identical, to focus on what we have in common versus what divides us, and pray that division is healed eventually. And I think that's like what we do now is, opening it to both Catholic, non-Catholics. Like the dialogue is going to be a stepping stone to